You've arrived at the quiet part of the night. The lights are off, the rain or fire sound is falling, and a story is waiting. You're safe here. Let me know in the comments, what time is it where you are? And do you usually fall asleep to stories like this? Subscribe and enable notifications to find your way back here again. Story 1. The night my car broke down twice. I broke the one rule everyone gives you about driving at night. And now something is trying to get inside. My name is Ava, and this is what happened on Highway 17, the stretch of road they call the Bone Corridor. It started as a simple, stupid mistake. My best friend Lee was getting married in her hometown, a speck on the map, 6 hours north of the city. Id promised to drive up, of course, but a last-minute work crisis meant I was leaving late, far too late. By the time I merged onto the desolate northern highway, the sun was a bloody memory behind the pines, and the only light came from my own headlights, carving a feeble tunnel through an ocean of black. Id heard the stories about Highway 17's spooky tales from truckers, about vanishing hitchhikers, and a feeling of being watched, but I was a pragmatist. I had a full tank of gas, a charged phone, and a playlist of true crime podcasts to keep me company. The unsettling details were subtle at first. My GPS flickered once, resetting for a split second. The radio, set to a static-laced classic rock station, suddenly played 3 seconds of a child's nursery rhyme before the guitar solo returned. I shook it off. Glitches. Mountains messing with the signal. The first flat tire was an inconvenience, not a crisis. A loud, jarring thump-thump-thump pulled me from a story about a missing hiker. I cursed, guided my sedan onto the narrow, gravel-strewn shoulder, and killed the engine. The silence that followed was absolute, a thick, velvety quiet that pressed against the windows. No distant cars, no insects, just the tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine. I called roadside assistance. The woman's voice was tinny, distant. Service on that stretch is limited, ma'am. A tow truck is about 90 minutes out. Lock your doors and stay in your vehicle. I did just that, feeling a prickle of unease as the interior lights went out, leaving me in the dashboard's green glow. This is the part where Id usually asks you guys something to break the tension. Like, what's your biggest fear when you're alone in the middle of nowhere? Is it other people or the silence itself? For me, in that moment, it was the silence. About 40 minutes into the wait, I saw the first flicker of movement in my rearview mirror. A pale, distant light, bobbing slowly along the tree line opposite the road. A flashlight. It moved with an odd, weaving gait, disappearing for long moments before reappearing closer. My heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I told myself it was a hunter, or maybe a park ranger, but who hunts in total darkness. The light kept advancing, not crossing the road, but tracing a parallel path towards me through the dense woods. I slunk down in my seat, my breath fogging the glass. I lost sight of it when it seemed to be directly across from my car, hidden by the bulk of the trunk. That's when the first knock came. It wasn't on the window. It was a soft, polite tap, tap, tap on the roof of the car, right above my head. I froze, my blood turning to ice slurry in my veins. I didn't breathe. The sound came again, a little further back, near the rear windshield. Tap, 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 like someone testing the surface, exploring the shape of my metal shell. Then it stopped. For 10 agonizing minutes, nothing happened. I dared to raise my head, scanning the impenetrable wall of trees. The light was gone. I let out a shuddering breath, convincing myself it had been a branch, an animal, my terrified imagination. The false safety was a warm, dizzying wave. See, I was okay. Just spooked. The tow truck arrived with blinding, beautiful strobes of yellow light. The driver, a burly man named Carl with kind eyes, changed the tire in 15 minutes flat. He didn't mention seeing anyone else around. Rough night to be stuck out here, he grunted, slamming the trunk closed. You get going. Follow me until the turnoff for the next town, about 20 miles up. Your spare's on, but don't push it. Grateful to tears, I followed his truck, clinging to its red taillights like they were a lifeline. When he turned off, I gave a grateful honk and drove on, the new tire humming a steady, reassuring song on the asphalt. The terror of the hour before began to feel like a bad dream. I was going to make it. I rolled down the window a crack, letting in the cold, pine-scented air to clear my head. That's when I smelled it. A scent cut through the clean forest air, the faint, cloying smell of damp earth and rotten flowers, like an open grave in spring. It grew stronger, pouring in through the ventilation system. I frantically hit the recirculate button, but the smell was already inside, clinging to the back of my throat. And then the thump, thump, thump started again. My heart seized. Not another flat. It couldn't be. But the steering wheel began to vibrate, pulling to the right. I guided the car, now trembling myself, onto another lonely stretch of shoulder. This time, there was no gravel, just soft, wet earth that sighed under the weight of the car. I was truly alone. No tow truck would come twice. My phone showed no service. The flat was on the driver's side. I would have to get out. The climax happened in slow motion. I grabbed the tire iron, my hands slippery with sweat. The dome light was blinding as I opened the door, exposing me to the vast, hungry dark. The smell of rot was overwhelming. I knelt by the flat, fumbling with the lug nuts, my ears straining for any sound beyond my own panicked grunts. I heard it then, a soft, wet squelching from the tree line, like footsteps in deep mud. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just worked faster, my fingers becoming clumsy tools of fear. The lug nuts were stuck. I threw my weight onto the tire iron. A twig snapped, close. Then another. Something was walking towards me, its steps slow, deliberate, leaving the cover of the trees. I finally risked a glance. Standing at the edge of my headlight beam was a figure, It was humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs too long, its posture a broken slump. It wasn't wearing dark clothes, it was made of the dark, a patch of deeper night that absorbed the light. Where a face should have been was a swirling, indistinct murk, but I felt its attention on me like a physical weight. It took one step forward onto the asphalt, and the headlights seemed to dim. I screamed, a raw animal sound, and wrenched the last lug nut free. I didn't put the spare on. I just ran, leaping into the car, slamming the door and locking it. The engine roared to life. I peeled out, the rim of the wheel shrieking against the pavement, throwing up sparks. In the rearview mirror, I saw it standing in the middle of the road, watching me go, its form beginning to dissipate like smoke. I drove on the rim for miles until I found a gas station, babbling my story to a skeptical clerk who called the police. The story ending is this. They found my car. They found the 2 flat tires both slashed by what looked like sharp, jagged stones. They wrote it up as vandalism and a traumatic episode. I moved cities. I never drive at night, but sometimes, very late, when the world is silent, I hear it. Not a knock, but the smell of damp earth and rotten flowers will seep into my apartment, usually near a vent or a window I know I locked. It's faint, just a hint, and it's always gone by morning. It's just checking to see if I am still inside, and I always am. I am always inside now. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of dread, then you understand why I have to share this. Please, if you enjoyed this tale of highway horror, give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people find these true horror stories. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next unsettling account. And most importantly, tell me in the comments, have you ever had something follow you home, not in body, but in feeling? What's your Highway 17 story? Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Story 2. The night the highway swallowed my brother. I need to tell you about the stretch of Route 17 that doesn't exist on any map, and what it took from me. My name is Ava, and this is the story of the night I learned that some roads are hungry. It started, like so many terrible things do, with a simple plan. My younger brother, Leo, and I were driving from Phoenix to Albuquerque to surprise our parents for their anniversary. We'd done the trip a dozen times, bickering over playlists and gas station snacks. This time was different. Leo had just turned 18, buzzing with that new adult arrogance, and he insisted on taking the wheel of his beat-up Jeep for the overnight leg. I am a man now, Ava. I can handle a little night driving, he said, grinning that infuriating grin. I agreed, mostly because I was exhausted from my nursing shift. The normalcy of it all was a comfort. The hum of the tires, the stale smell of fast food bags in the footwell, the vast, stardusted desert scrolling past my window. But even then, there were details I'd later obsess over. The GPS signal had been flickering for an hour. The headlights seemed to push back a darkness that was thicker than usual, more liquid. and the few other cars we saw their taillights like distant, dying imbursol seemed to be going the opposite way. About 2 hours in, a detour sign appeared, sudden and stark in the headlights. Road, work ahead. Use alternate Route 17. An arrow pointed down a narrow, unmarked off-ramp. Leo groaned. Great. Just what we need. I remember feeling a prickle of unease. I'd never heard of a Route 17 out here. But the main interstate was indeed blocked by orange barrels and silent machinery, so we took the turn. The new road was a single lane of cracked asphalt, hemmed in by walls of scrub oak and looming Joshua trees that seemed to lean in, their twisted arms clawing at the sky. The comforting hum of the interstate faded, replaced by an absolute, oppressive silence. Our headlights became the only world. I caught a glimpse of a weathered, bullet-riddled mile marker. It read 17, but the numbers beneath were scrubbed away. Spooky, Leo muttered, trying to sound brave, but I heard the slight tremor. He turned on the radio. Static. He scanned. More static. Then, a clear, crisp voice from a station that shouldn't have been receivable. A smooth, old-timey radio host was telling a story about a hitchhiker who vanished on a lonely desert road. Leo laughed nervously and switched it off. The silence rushed back in, heavier than before. Okay, let me pause here for a second. I have to ask you, because I think about this all the time now. What's your personal rule for when you're driving? You know, one of those little superstitions or safety things you always follow. Never pick up a hitchhiker. Always keep the gas tank above half. For me, it was always to never, ever stop on a deserted road at night. I wish it made Leo understand that, because about 20 minutes down Route 17, we saw the car. It was an old, boxy sedan, parked at a drunken angle on the narrow shoulder, its hazard lights blinking a sluggish, weak yellow. A figure stood beside it, one arm raised in a hesitant wave. As we drew closer, the headlights illuminated a woman. She was maybe in her 40s, dressed in a light summer dress that was utterly wrong for the desert chill, and her face was pale, etched with a panic that looked utterly genuine. Leo immediately started to slow down. Ava, we have to help her. Leo, no, I said, my voice tight. We don't stop. We call for help when we have signal. But he was already pulling over, his sense of chivalry overriding every horror movie lesson ever taught. It'll take 2 seconds, he said. He rolled down his window. The air that poured in was cold and carried a faint, coppery scent like wet pennies. Thank you for stopping, the woman breathed, her voice high and thready. My car just died. My phone's dead. I've been here for hours. She leaned in, and in the dashboard glow, I saw her eyes were wide, the pupils huge. She wasn't looking at Leo, she was staring past him, directly at me. You shouldn't be on this road, she whispered, just to me. Leo, oblivious, was already unbuckling. I've got jumper cables in the back. Let me take a look. He opened his door and stepped out. I grabbed his arm. Leo, please, get back in. The woman took a step back. melting into the shadows beyond our headlights. "It's too late," her voice came from the darkness. "He's already seen you." A deep, guttural sound echoed from the tree-line, not an animal sound, but a low, vibrating groan, like stone grinding against stone. The temperature in the Jeep plummeted. Leo's bravado vanished. "Okay, yeah, let's go," he said, scrambling back into his seat. He fumbled with the key. The engine turned over once, coughed, and died. He tried again. Nothing, just a sickening click. The headlights dimmed, then failed, plunging us into near-total darkness. Save for the Jeep's dying interior light and the weak, rhythmic blink of the sedan's hazards. That's when we saw the other figures. They weren't there before, but now they stood at the edge of the light, just beyond the scrub. Tall, impossibly thin shapes, silhouetted against the deeper black. They didn't move. They just watched. The woman in the dress was gone. We sat in petrified silence for what felt like an eternity. The groaning sound had stopped. The figures hadn't moved. Maybe they're just trees," Leo whispered, his voice cracking. Trick of the light. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. So when, after 10 more minutes, nothing happened, and the engine miraculously roared to life on his next try, we both sobbed with relief. The headlights blazed back on. The shoulder was empty. No sedan, no woman, no figures, just the lonely road stretching ahead. "See, just a weird glitch," Leo said, his hands shaking on the wheel as he pulled back onto the asphalt. He drove faster now, desperate to put miles between us and that spot. I kept my eyes glued to the side mirror, expecting to see those tall shapes loping after us. But there was only retreating darkness. A fragile, trembling hope settled in my chest. Wed had a scare, a collective hallucination born of fatigue and spooky stories. We'd get to the next town, laugh about it over terrible truck stop coffee, and that would be that. We drove in silence for another 30 minutes. The road began to look familiar. I saw the same distinctive, lightning-struck Joshua tree. I saw the same pothole. My blood turned to ice. "Leo," I said quietly, "I think we're going in a circle." "No, that's impossible," he insisted, but his knuckles were white. We passed the bullet-riddled mile marker again. Route 17. Then we saw the orange barrels blocking the main interstate up ahead. The same detour sign. We had looped back to the beginning. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. Leo slammed his fist on the steering wheel. "What is this?" He sped up, determined to break the cycle. The Jeep hurtled through the dark tunnel of trees. And then, in the middle of the road, illuminated by our high beams, stood the woman in the dress. She was directly in our path, her arms at her sides, her head tilted. Leo screamed and yanked the wheel hard to the right. The world became a violent cacophony of screeching metal, shattering glass, and my own scream. The Jeep left the road, tumbled down a shallow embankment, and came to a jarring, deafening stop on its passenger side. Dazed, pain screaming from my shoulder, I hung suspended by my seatbelt. Leo, Leo, I cried. He was slumped against the driver's side window, which was now pressed into the dirt. A trickle of blood traced a path from his temple, but he was breathing. I fumbled for my seatbelt release, fell against him, and scrambled to push open my door, which was now above us. Cold night air flooded in. I hauled myself out, then reached back in, grabbing Leo under his arms, pulling with every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength I had. I dragged him out onto the cold, gritty sand. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate crunches on the gravel from the road above. I looked up. The tall figures stood along the embankment's rim, looking down at us. They were no longer silhouettes. In the faint, bruised light of the pre-dawn sky, I could see they were emaciated, their skin like stretched, gray leather over sharp bones. They had no faces, just smooth, dark hollows where their features should be. They began to descend, not walking, but sliding down the slope with an unnatural, fluid grace. I tried to drag Leo further from the car from them, but he was too heavy. One of the figures reached us first. It leaned over Leo, its hollow face inches from his. It didn't touch him. Instead, it opened its mouth of black, ragged slit hand, breathed out. A visible, shimmering stream of silver mist, like breath on a cold day, flowed from Leo's parted lips and into the thing's mouth. Leo's body shuddered, then went completely, terribly still. I screamed and threw myself at the creature, my fists pounding against its chest, which felt like petrified wood. It didn't acknowledge me. It simply straightened up, turned, and began to climb back up the embankment with the others. They moved into the trees and were gone. I collapsed beside Leo, sobbing, checking his pulse. It was there, but faint and slow. His skin was cold. His eyes were open, staring at the sky, but there was nothing behind them. No recognition, no fear, no Leo, just vacancy. The sun began to rise, painting the desert in cruel, beautiful hues of orange and pink. With the light, my phone buzzed to life in my pocket, a flood of delayed notifications. A tow truck, summoned by some automated crash alert, found us an hour later. The paramedics loaded Leo onto a gurney. They asked me about the accident. I told them about swerving to avoid an animal. I didn't mention the road, the woman, the figures. They'd think I was crazy. They already looked at me with pity, assuming my story was fractured by trauma. At the hospital, the doctors were baffled. Leo was in a perfect, deep coma. All his bodily functions were normal, but his brain activity was minimal. Just the bare, autonomic flicker to keep him alive. They called it a miracle he survived the crash with so little physical injury. They called his condition an anomaly. I knew the truth. He hadn't survived. Not really. They'd taken what made him him. They'd fed on it. I sit by his bedside every day now, holding his limp hand, talking to him about nothing. The police report listed the cause of the accident as driver fatigue on an unmaintained service road. There is no Route 17 on their maps. The detour signs were never officially posted. They told told me I was lucky. Last night, as I left the hospital, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from a traffic app I never use. It read, "Heavy congestion reported on your frequent route, Route 17. Consider alternate path." I deleted the app. I threw my phone into the glove box. But tonight, as I drive the long, familiar, well-lit highway to the hospital, I keep glancing at the off-ramps. And sometimes, in the very corner of my eye, I think I see a faded, bullet-riddled sign. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of dread, then you understand why I had to share it. If you want to hear more tales from the edges of the world we think we know, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And in the comments below, I'd really like to know what's your personal, unbreakable rule for the road. Stay safe out there. Story 3. The night my house learned my name. I didn't believe my house was alive until it started whispering back. My name is Ava, and 6 months ago, I inherited my grandmother's old Victorian on Briarwood Lane. It was a windfall, a staggering act of generosity from a woman it always found distant and strange. The lawyers said Shed left it specifically to me, her most observant grandchild. At the time, I took it as a compliment. Now, I think it was a warning. The normalcy was there, painted over the strangeness like a cheap coat of paint. I loved the high ceilings, the sunlight through the stained glass in the parlor, the smell of old books and beeswax. But there were the details, the ones you notice, but explain away. The floorboards in the upstairs hall creaked in a specific 5-step sequence every night at 3:17 a.m., like someone pacing. The antique mirror in the foyer always made me look just a little paler, a little more tired than I felt. And the house was never quiet. Not the settling noises of an old building, but a low, almost subaudible hum, like a giant machine sleeping deep in the earth below the foundation. I told myself it was the pipes, the wind in the eaves. I was good at convincing myself. So, what about you guys? Have you ever lived somewhere that just never felt empty? Like you were sharing your space with the very walls themselves? Let me know in the comments. The escalation was slow, a drip feed of dread. It started with the whispers. I'd be reading in the living room, and I'd hear my name, Ava, sighed from the kitchen. Just once, clear as day. I'd check, finding only the silent hum of the refrigerator. Then it was the doors. I am a creature of habit. I close doors. Yet, I'd wake up to find my bedroom door wide open, or come home to find the basement door, which I kept locked, slightly ajar, the lock itself cold to the touch. The smell began soon after not rot, but ozone and damp soil, like the air after a lightning strike deep in a forest. It would appear in one room, then vanish, only to find me in another. The worst was the learning. The house began to mimic. I have a bad knee from a college soccer injury, and I have a slight limp when I'm tired. One night, lying awake, I heard it, the familiar drag step of my own gait, pacing the hall outside my room. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It wasn't an intruder. It was the house, practicing being me. I started sleeping with the lights on. The false safety came after a particularly bad week. I'd been hearing scratching inside the walls, and the whispers had become full, murmured sentences I couldn't quite decipher. I'd had enough. I called a priest, a family friend. Father Mark walked through every room, sprinkling holy water, praying loudly. He felt the chill in the foyer, saw the way the shadows in the hall seemed to cling to the corners. But at the end, he stood on the porch, looking troubled. "There's no presence here, Ava," he said. "No spirit, no demonic attachment. The house is clean." He saw my disbelief. Sometimes old houses have strange acoustics. Drafts. You're alone here. It's easy for the mind to play tricks. His words were a balm. I wanted to believe him so desperately. For 3 days, the house was silent. The hum was gone. The doors stayed shut. I slept through the night. I thought it was over. I thought I'd won. Climax happened on the 4th night. I was in the basement, finally brave enough to sort through Grandma's old trunks. The single bulb flickered, then died, plunging me into absolute blackness. Before I could even gasp, the emergency light I'd installed clicked on, casting a stark red glow. And I saw the wall. The stone foundation wall, which had been bare, was now covered in writing. Not graffiti, but a single sentence, written over and over in a frantic, familiar script-me script. Ava is home. Ava is home. Ava is home. It was my handwriting, down to the specific way I loop my S. As I stared, paralyzed, the hum returned, louder than ever, vibrating up through the soles of my feet. It wasn't a machine. It was a voice, a deep, grinding, stone-on-stone voice that didn't come from any one place, but from everywhere at once. It spoke from the walls, the floor, the very air. AVA. The red light stuttered. In the pulses of darkness, the writing on the wall changed. The is was being slowly, meticulously scratched out by an unseen force. A new word was being carved in its place, stone dust trickling down as the letters formed. Was. Ava was home. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. The house wasn't haunted. The house was the haunt, and it had finished learning. It didn't need to mimic me anymore. It was preparing for my absence. I stumbled backwards, my scream trapped in my throat. The red light died for good, and in the perfect, suffocating blackness, I felt the walls themselves begin to contract, to breathe in, drawing the air and the space and me inwards. I don't remember how I got out. I think the house let me go. I ran barefoot into the street, and I never looked back. I am writing this from a bland, beige rental apartment. The walls are thin, and I can hear my neighbors. It's a comforting sound. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the complex is silent, I'll feel a faint, familiar vibration through the floor, and I'll hear, just on the edge of hearing, a deep, stone whisper that knows exactly where I am. The house is patient. It learned my name, and now it's learning my new address. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you know the kind of horror that sticks with you. If you want more tales of the deeply unsettling, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And let me know in the comments what's the strangest thing your home has ever done. Story 4. The door my grandmother never opened. I wasn't supposed to go into the attic. I know that sounds like the beginning of every bad horror story, but my grandmother's warning was specific, delivered with a grip that left crescent moons on my wrist. The door at the end of the upstairs hall is not a door, Ava. It's a seal. You do not break seals. After she passed and left me the sprawling Victorian-era house, I thought her words were just the ramblings of an old woman succumbing to dementia. I was wrong. The first week in the house was a symphony of settling groans and whispered memories. I was painting the parlor a cheerful yellow, trying to bleach the gloom from the ornate woodwork, when I noticed the first detail. The house had a smell not the expected mothballs and dust, but the scent of damp soil and ozone, like the air after a lightning strike hits too close. It clung to the upper floor. The second detail was the temperature. No matter how high I cranked the ancient furnace, the upstairs hallway remained stubbornly, flesh-pricklingly cold. A chill that seemed to emanate from that one locked door at the end. The third was the silence. The house was on a busy enough street, but no sound from the outside world, no cars, no sirens, no distant laughter ever penetrated the second floor. It was a vault. I tried to ignore it. I am a pragmatic person, a graphic designer who works remotely. I told myself the lock was just old, the cold spot a draft, the smell a quirk of ancient plumbing. But then the sounds started. Not groans or shrieks, but something far worse, a soft, rhythmic scratching. It was the sound of something methodical, patient, working from the other side of that door. It would start every night at 3:07 a.m., precise as a clockwork mechanism. It would last for exactly 7 minutes, then stop. It'd lie in the bed that was once my grandmother's, my heart hammering against my ribs, staring at the ceiling and trying to logic it away. Squirrels in the eaves, it'd think, expanding and contracting pipes. But logic has a breaking point. Mine shattered on a Tuesday. Id had a video call with a client that ran late, and I was brewing tea in the kitchen at 2 a.m. As I waited for the kettle to whistle, I heard a new sound from above. A voice. It was faint, muffled by wood and plaster, but unmistakably my grandmother's. Ava, it called, thin and reedy. I am stuck, darling. The key, it's on the ledge. Let me out. A cold dread, thicker than any fear I'd ever known, poured down my spine. My grandmother was dead. Id identified the body. Id scattered the ashes. So let me ask you all something, because I am genuinely curious now. In the cold light of what came afterwards the one rule you were given as a child that you were told, absolutely, never to break? And did you ever break it? Let me know in the comments. I didn't sleep that night. The voice didn't come again, but the scratching resumed at its usual time, now sounding less like an animal and more like fingernails. Dry, desperate fingernails on old wood. The next day, driven by a mixture of terror and a furious need to prove to myself that I was not losing my mind, I went to the hardware store. I bought a crowbar. The rational part of my brain, now a tiny, flickering candle in a vast, dark room, argued that if I could just see the empty, dusty attic space, the spell would be broken. The fear would have a shape, and that shape would be nothing. The air in the hallway was frigid as I approached the door that evening. The smell of wet earth was overpowering. My hands were slick with sweat on the cold steel of the crowbar. I wedged it into the space between the door and the frame, right next to the heavy, tarnished lock. The wood splintered with a sound like a bone snapping. The lock gave way with a metallic shriek. The door swung inward silently, revealing not a cramped attic, but an impossibly long, dark corridor. It stretched away into a blackness, so complete it seemed to swallow the light from the hallway behind me. The air that wafted out was warm and humid, carrying the rich, fecund smell of a deep forest at night. My legs moved without my conscious command. I stepped across the threshold. The door slammed shut behind me with a finality that shook the walls. I was plunged into absolute darkness. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling so violently I almost dropped it. The flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating walls that were not plaster and lath, but packed, dark earth, held back by gnarled, living tree roots that pulsed faintly, as if with a slow heartbeat. The corridor stretched ahead. A tunnel burrowed into the earth, and from the darkness ahead, the scratching started again. Closer now. I ran. Not back, the door was gone. The wall behind me now seamless earth-butt forward, driven by a primal panic. The tunnel twisted and turned, the roots sometimes brushing against my hair like skeletal fingers. I could hear something moving behind me, a slow, dragging shuffle accompanied by a wet, labored breathing that was not human. My phone light caught glimpses of things embedded in the walls. Old dolls with porcelain faces, cracked into grimaces, tarnished silver picture frames, holding photos of people I didn't know, their eyes scratched out. And always, the smell of ozone and rot. I don't know how long I ran. Time lost meaning in that subterranean nightmare. Eventually, I stumbled into a small, circular chamber. In the center was an old, threadbare armchair, and in it sat my grandmother, or something wearing her skin, her head lolled to the side, her eyes milky and unseeing, but her mouth moved. "You broke the seal, Ava," the thing said, its voice a dry rustle of leaves. "Now you must take my place. Someone must sit in the chair. Someone must hold the door shut from this side." I backed away, bile rising rising in my throat. The dragging shuffle was at the tunnel entrance now. I could see a shape coalescing in the shadow stall, impossibly thin, its limbs bending in too many places. The thing in my grandmother's chair began to crumple, to desiccate and turn to dust before my eyes. The chair was empty. The dragging thing took a step into the chamber. A long, thin arm, ending in fingers like twisted branches, reached for me. I did the only thing I could think of. Screamed, and I threw my phone at it. The light spun, casting crazy shadows. In the chaos, I didn't run back into the tunnel. I ran past the chair, deeper into the darkness behind it. I found another corridor, narrower, steeper. I climbed, my lungs burning, until I saw a sliver of light above me. I pushed up, and with a gasp, I tumbled out onto a cold, hard floor. I was in the upstairs hallway of my grandmother's house. The broken door to the attic was right in front of me, slightly ajar. Pale morning light filtered through the window at the end of the hall. I lay there, sobbing with relief, convinced I had somehow escaped, that it had all been a prolonged, horrific nightmare born of grief and stress. I spent the day boarding up the door with thick planks of wood, nailing them into the frame with a fervor that bordered on madness. I called a priest, a psychic, a handyman. No one came. The phone lines were dead. My internet was down. The world outside the windows looked normal, but no cars passed. The silence was absolute. That night, exhausted, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep in the parlor. I woke at 3:07 a.m. The scratching was gone. Instead, I heard a new sound. It was the soft, familiar creak of the rocking chair in the corner of my bedroom upstairs, rocking back and forth, back and forth. And I knew, with a certainty that froze the blood in my veins, that I hadn't escaped at all. I had simply changed my seat in the theater, because the thing that holds the door shut needs to rest sometimes. And now, it's sitting in my favorite chair, waiting for its turn to walk around the house. I can hear its footsteps on the floor above me, slow and deliberate, exploring the rooms I tried to make my own. It's learning the sound of my breathing from right below the floorboards. And when it's ready, it's going to teach me what my grandmother knew. Some doors aren't meant to be closed. They're meant to be guarded from the inside. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're not alone. This channel is dedicated to exploring the shadows just outside the light. If you want to hear more tales from the edge of reality, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. And let me know in the comments what did you think was at the end of that corridor. Your theories are often scarier than my stories. Story 5. The last guest of the Redwood cabin. I know with absolute certainty that I was never alone in that cabin. My name is Ava, and I booked a remote airbnb in the Redwoods for a week of digital detox. A chance to finally finish writing my novel away from the endless pings of city life. The listing was perfect. The Redwood Haven, a solitary cabin built by a reclusive artist in the 70s. All exposed wood and massive windows looking into a private, ancient grove. It was exactly the serene isolation I craved. The first unsettling detail was the guest book. Every entry for the last 2 years was written in the same precise, looping cursive, each one more effusive than the last, praising the profound quiet and the feeling of being truly seen. The second was the sheer density of the woods by 4 p.m. The cabin was plunged into a deep, emerald twilight, and the sunlight never seemed to reach the forest floor. The third was the smell, not the expected pine, but a persistent, faint sweetness, like honeysuckle and damp earth, that clung to the wool blankets in the closet. The first 2 days were productive. I wrote for hours, the only sounds the crackle of the fire I kept in the stone hearth and the distant calls of birds. I felt a creative flow I hadn't experienced in years. But on the third night, the silence changed. It became a presence. It'd pause my typing, and in the absence of the keyboard clicks, it'd hear not nothing, but a kind of attentive hush, like the forest was holding its breath. Then came the tapping, a soft, irregular tap, tap, tap on the west-facing window, the one that looked directly into the heart of the grove. I dismissed it as a branch, though I remembered there being no tree close enough to reach the glass. The next day, I found a single, perfect redwood cone placed squarely in the center of my writing desk. I had not brought it inside. My skin prickled. I messaged the host, a man named Elias, whose replies were always delayed but polite. The forest provides little gifts sometimes, he wrote. The previous guest must have left it. Enjoy the solitude. It felt like a scripted response. That night, the tapping returned, stronger. Tap, scrape, tap. I shone my phone's flashlight at the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing but the black void of the woods and my own pale, wide-eyed reflection staring back. Okay, let me ask you guys something, because I am genuinely curious. What's the one sound in your house at night that just immediately puts you on edge? For me, it used to be the furnace kicking on. Now, it's the sound of something politely asking to be let in. Things escalated after the dream. I dreamed I was standing at that same window, but in the dream, the forest was bathed in an eerie, moonlight bright glow, and standing between the trees, just at the edge of visibility, was a tall, slender figure. It wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its posture a stiff mimicry of a person waiting. It didn't move, but I felt its attention like a physical weight. I woke up gasping, drenched in cold sweat, the faint, sweet smell in the room now overpoweringly strong. That's when I noticed the first photograph on the mantelpiece. I was sure it hadn't been there before. It was an old, faded Polaroid of the cabin, and in the lower left corner, barely visible, was the same elongated figure, standing in the exact same spot I'd seen in my dream. Panic set in. I packed my laptop, my notes, ready to bolt. called Elias, my voice trembling. "I need to leave. Something is wrong here." There was a long silence on the line. Then his voice, calm and smooth as oil, said, "Ava, you're the first guest in a long time who has truly connected with the property." The last guest, she understood too. "She's still here in a way. Don't you want to finish your book?" The call dropped. All the bars on my phone vanished. The cabin's Wi-Fi was dead. This was the false safety. I decided I was being paranoid. The stress of my deadline, the isolation, it was getting to me. Elias was just a weird, overly invested host. The figure was a trick of the light, my subconscious weaving stories from shadows. I decided to stay one more night, to prove to myself I could. I built a roaring fire, turned on every light, and focused on my writing with a desperate intensity. For a few hours, it worked. The words flowed again, better than ever. The protagonist in my novel, trapped in a haunted house, began to see the spirit not as a threat, but as a muse. I wrote like a woman possessed. Then the fire died down. The lights flickered once, twice, and went out, plunging the cabin into a blackness so complete it felt solid. The sweet, cloying smell flooded the room, thick enough to taste. And from the corner, near the now invisible window, came a new sound. A dry, rustling whisper like pages turning. But I had no paper books with me. SHHH, SHHH, SHHH. My breath hitched. "Who's there?" The whisper stopped. Then, from a different corner, closer to the fireplace, a soft, sighing voice, layered and wrong, like multiple people speaking at once, seeped into the silence. "We read your words. We like them." I scrambled backward, my chair toppling over. I fumbled for my phone, activating the flashlight. The beam swept across the room, catching the glass of the window. My reflection was there, terrified, but standing directly behind my reflection, its long, thin hands resting on the shoulders of my mirrored self, was the figure. Its face was a smooth, dark oval, featureless save for two deep, non-reflective pools where eyes should be. It was inside. It had been inside the whole time. I screamed and bolted for the door, yanking it open. The cold night air hit me, but the path to my car was gone. In its place was the endless, impenetrable wall of the Redwood grove, the trees now seeming to have crept forward, their roots snaking over the gravel driveway. The whispering voice came from behind me, inside the warm, dark cabin. "The story isn't finished. The last guest left it incomplete. You will be better." I turned, shining the light back inside. The cabin was empty, but on my desk, my laptop was open, its battery light glowing. On the screen, my document was open, but it was no longer my novel. The page was filled, top to bottom, with a single sentence, repeated thousands of times in my own font. "She stays to write the ending. She stays to write the ending. She stays to write the ending." I ran. I didn't care about the trees, the darkness, the roots that seemed to clutch at my ankles. I ran blind, branches whipping my face, the whispering now a chorus in the wind through the needles above. stay, right, be our last guest. I don't know how long I ran, or how I eventually found the main road, collapsing in front of a park ranger's truck at dawn. They found the cabin empty. My things were still there, neatly arranged. The laptop was dead. The host, Elias, doesn't exist. The identity was stolen years ago. The police called it an elaborate prank, a squatter situation. They told me I was lucky to have gotten out. But I'm not out, because I finally finished my novel. It became a bestseller. They call it a masterpiece of psychological horror. Every night, when the world goes quiet, I sit at my desk in my safe, bright apartment in the city, and I try to write something new. But my fingers won't move. The words won't come. All I can smell is that faint, sweet scent of honeysuckle and damp earth. And on the blank document, a single, blinking cursor waits. It's patient. It knows it'll have to start telling its story again soon. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something just over your shoulder, then you understand. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. And in the comments below, I'd really like to know, have you ever stayed somewhere that just felt wrong from the moment you arrived? Thank you for listening and staying until the end. If you enjoyed this narration, please leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel for more stories in the dark. Sharing it with your friends helps keep these nights alive. Sleep well. The rain will continue.